Hey everyone. So, in the FTB Skies Expert Discord, I've been receiving a bunch of questions about how I generate power, specifically around processing oil into diesel and into diesel fuels, such as the force infused diesel. So, I want to talk a little bit about my methodology. This is just going to be a single take. I'm not going to cut, edit, anything like that. We're just going to go through and kind of show you what I've done, what's worked for me, and we're going to show you the initial plan and then what we upgraded to with Pneumaticraft. So the first thing I started out with was obviously you have your refinery controller, and if you're not aware, the higher the temperature, the faster it produces. So there's not a bunch of upgrades and things like that that you can use, but you can increase the speed of production based on temperature. So the way I started, now this is obviously processing liquefied source, but it works the same way if it was running diesel or running oil to make diesel and kerosene. The way I started out was with a blaze burner. And currently, the way as of March, the blaze burner that uses liquid underperforms significantly. I think it gets a factor of 10 less than a solid fuel burning one. So we're using a solid burning blaze burner here. Hit my mouse. Obviously, I have blaze cakes here. Usually, when you're at this point, you've automated sifting for netherrack or sifting the netherrack, and then you get um, your crafting material of cinder flour from doing that. You should be able to get eggs and sugar. I also get sugar from my sugar cane that I'm also sifting for. So you should have all the things you need to be able to make blaze cakes. And it doesn't use very many blaze cakes. So it uses one, I think it's every like 2 minutes or something along those lines. To be able to manually do, you can manually feed this, but obviously I wanted to automate it. So I just use a deployer with some blaze cakes. You could run a hopper and a drawer into this if you wanted. I don't run source all the time, so it's not automated here. But the great thing is that the electric motor set to one only uses 13 FE a tick, so it's basically free energy when you're doing it this slow. When you use this electric motor at higher RPMs, it doesn't work quite as well. The FE that it requires is quite high, but for this individual task that I'm trying to do, running it at the lowest setting works perfect. It's way more than enough. And it deploys the blaze cakes onto the blaze burner, which keeps it at superheated, which is the blue. So from there, I have it set up next to my refinery controller, and you can see I have lagging on the side. So if you're not super familiar, the lagging, thermal lagging here can be used with wool blocks and glass, can make lagging. And this is a thin layer of insulation, so it counts as insulated, so you don't have to surround it with blocks. But as long as there's any block around it, it works the same as with lagging. So you can see these heat pipes that I'm running on the side, as well as on the back, we can see my tubing. And actually, because it's right up next to my magnets, this one already gets its lag. It doesn't need lagging because it's next to the magnet. So we just want to make sure all sides are covered, and you'll know that when it has the green check mark. Normally, it would, if there was lagging missing, it would tell you that one side is not being covered. But what you can see with this blaze burner is we're running over 1000 C. So we're running 1100 C through the heat pipes. The heat pipes distribute the heat better. So I don't know that they're strictly needed, but because they move the heat over to the refinery faster, it speeds up and holds and maintains temperature better from my experience. So this is how I processed oil for quite a while. I used this system. I think I had at the beginning I had two refineries off of one blaze burner, so I just set the other one where these tanks are at, and it shared the same blaze burner, and I used the same deployer. So I used this setup for quite a while. Eventually, I had moved over to using the tier 3 diesel generators, which consume a lot more fuel. So once you're having to consume a lot more fuel, you need to produce a lot more fuel. And 1000 C wasn't quite fast enough. So that's when you move over to doing pneumaticraft. So you don't want to, you really don't want to do this until your power generation is quite high. Because once I right click on this, when we look at the input, I'm using 2200 FE a tick to power this flux compressor, which is quite a bit of power if you're just starting using generators, right? But you can see here I have multiple setups. They're running quite fast. So when we go over to my power, we can see that my input's 227. So 2000, 1%, it's not really hurting me at all. So it's well within what I can sacrifice. But when I first, that's why I use the blaze burners when I start out, because it's just so much more efficient than trying to do vortexes and power those vortexes with pneumaticraft, because you'll end up having to create either a large structure that makes a lot of pressure, which is hard to do with the other forms of compressors until you get to the flux compressor. This one I use because of simplicity. So it's using a low amount. It's simple. It's nice. This is why I use it. So let's talk about what this setup looks like with this power source. So like I said, this setup that you'll see here is actually for the same setup I was using when I was using Blaze, and I just retrofitted it to use the Vortex tubes. As you can see, we have our controller and our outputs. We have the lagging just the same, and instead of a Blaze burner and 2 heat pipes, I'm using 3 heat pipes with 2 vortex tubes. So I use 2 vortex tubes. I think when I used one, I didn't get quite as high, but these guys are maxed out at the north or hot temperature at 2000 C. So we're running at 20 psi. If I run to be able to run 4 vortex tubes, I needed to, at 20 psi, I needed 8 speed upgrades. If I take one of the speed upgrades out and I go down to 7, it drops down to like 13 psi or bar. I'm sorry, it's not psi. Psi bar, I'm going to use them interchangeably. In real life, those are not the same things. For this, it's good enough. You understand what I'm trying to get at. So if I dropped one of those speed upgrades, I drop down below that 2000 degree threshold. So I really want to keep it at 2000 degrees. I'm trying to maximize what I can do here. And you can see here, this one, 1900, 2000. It's bouncing right at or close to that 2000. So that's where we really want to be at. So I run the flux capacitor with the amount of upgrades I need. This will go up or down based on the number of vortex tubes that you're trying to drive. Just know you're going to be using more or less power depending on. So if you only want to drive 1 vortex tube, then you'll be using less power. You'll need less speed upgrades. I throw a security upgrade in there just to keep everything from blowing up. And it's simple as that. With that, I do run a couple of heat sinks, as we can see here. And then I run a pressure tube on a low pressure setup. So this is on the traditional, like when you first start out using the rotational compressor, you need at least the 1 bar to be able to produce the fuel. So I'm running at 1 bar, and this 1 bar pushes just enough air to hit 4 blocks, which blows air over these heat sinks. And this keeps the flux compressor cool. It loses efficiency the hotter it gets. So that's what that is. You can also see that I'm running a heat pipe out because the vortex tubes on the cold side will generate very cold temperatures. As you can see here, minus 135 C. So I have them connected to heat pipes, and then I run some of that cold temperature over into the flux compressor. It heats up quite well, so when I tried to cool it only with heat pipes, it wasn't cold enough, and right now it's at 90% efficient, so I wasn't going to keep messing with it to get higher efficiency just because the power is insignificant at this level anyway. So we run our advanced pressure tubes so they can run 20 bar, and we run those over to our vortex tubes. They run hot side towards the heat pipes, cold side towards the heat sinks. That goes into our 3 refinery controllers. This one doesn't have lagging because this one does, and that counts. So that's another thing that you pay attention to. You just want to make sure when you click on it, it says no problems. So now that I'm running at 2000 C or close to 2000 C on these because they're using some heat, so it doesn't get quite to 2000. It's producing quite a bit faster. So now I started to I was running on one of these. I decided I wanted a second one. I was actually falling a little bit behind on my production. And if we go over here, we can see my production right now is at 48,000 buckets. And then my oil is at 42,000 buckets. So I have quite a bit of storage. But I was actually losing a little bit, so I expanded it. So I added some speed upgrades and just mirrored it on this side. It's exactly the same setup. So we have the vortex tubes on the back. So I have some basic mechanical pipes on the bottom that are running oil that we get from space. I assume you know how to get oil, how many lasers you're going to need, and how many upgrades you're going to need comes down to the amount of oil that you're going to be using. But obviously, you want to be as efficient as you can. I use an ender tank to get the oil out of space, out of the space station, and I bring it down to a flux drawer just because the flux drawer can store up, plenty. Obviously, it's up to 131. I'm going to throw another storage into this just to max it out because I'm starting to get close to that 131. And then I draw oil from that and just into basic mechanical pipes because it doesn't actually use that much. So it goes through it quite slowly. So these pipes work just fine. I don't need to upgrade them at all. So we get our oil coming in. The oil gets processed at a very high temperature, so you can see it's making the fuel quite quickly. The fuel I export out and I drive that over to our thermopneumatic processing plant, and it processes that, puts it into or it force infuses it, right? So normal diesel is decent, but force infused is quite a bit better. So I force infuse it. I drive that into storage, so we can see this one's fully upgraded, so it can hold 2.1 million, but we only have 48,000 in there. And then that just drives down into a orange ender tank, and that just allows us to be able to use it wherever we need it. So any place that I'm going to put a diesel generator, I just put an orange ender tank, and I have the diesel fuel that I need wherever I need it. So this is the basic setup of how I run my pneumaticraft oil processing. For the force infused, I use bees. In this case, these bees produce way more comb than I need. This was empty less than 12 hours ago. I emptied these and now I have way more than I ever need. This is very much overkill. You might only need one or two hives with some time torches. The bees are meternal, so they produce day and night, which is very helpful. But we also use the source gems to make some of our other materials in other places. So instead of having multiple setups, I just have one and I just bring this material over when I need it. And obviously there's a fabrication matrix that turns the force comb into force gems. I trash the honey and the wax and all that stuff. All that stuff just goes into trash cans because all we really need is the gems for this setup. For the thermopneumatic, I just pull off a little bit of rotational power off of the front of the generator, just enough. So it's at 110. So it's just enough to be able to drive the rotational compressor to keep 1 bar of pressure. I don't like hearing the blow off valve all the time, and I just didn't want to muffle it because I still need to hear that in other places. So I didn't want to muffle it. So I just run it to a vortex tube. This literally is just a bleed off to bleed off extra pressure silently, which is the key. So I wanted to keep it quiet. I could use mufflers, I could use other things. This was just the fast, easy way. Like I said, I haven't done R&D on this. I haven't really engineered this out in a creative world to find out if this is the most efficient or anything along those lines. This is just what I threw together in the process of being able to make it. Now this is set up for a server that runs 24/7. So this is a zero input 24/7. It runs, this has been running for weeks without any issues. If you're not running a server, you can do this stuff way easier with inputs that you do when you get on, you load it up and you're done for the time you're going to play, and it's not going to run dry. I didn't want to risk running dry or anything like that. So I set this up for 24-hour service, no input, without any issues. And this is kind of what I've landed on for now. If I need more, and I will need more, I'll need to process more oil at some point for additional generators. I would just mirror this 2 more times on the backside. So I could pull the same oil over, I could use the same pressure over, and then basically have, as these 6, I could set it up facing this way for 6 more. So I could double my processing there. If I did that, I'd probably be able to run 8 or 9 of these magnet setups at pretty much full speed, if my math is correct. I'm just thinking off the top of my head here. So for now, it's good. Like I said, I'm making over 200 a tick, 200,000 a tick, which is plenty for all of the machines and everything that we have going on. This is just my starter battery, because batteries, we don't really have good storage. So I use this to power my arc furnace before I had batteries. And then I just kind of left it up as a reminder. You'll see there's a lot of legacy stuff that doesn't get used that we just kind of leave up. For example, the mixer, which doesn't exist anymore. I literally build around this thing just to keep it here, because once you break it, you can't get it back. And it just reminds me of when I had to use a mixer to force infuse fuels. But you can see we have all these devices, all this automation happening over here. This is way more than enough power. I have almost gotten a billion FE stored in my mechanism battery now. It generates all the time. There's, like I said, it's no inputs. It's not as difficult as it would seem to be. You just have to think about the layout a little bit, and you can simplify this quite easily. A few people have said that, there's better ways to do it. By all means, if you have a better way, that's great. But several people have asked for some input here, so I wanted to give you what my input was and kind of how I did it. Oh, the one thing I did forget was kerosene comes out of the top. I just, again, have that going to a storage drawer. We don't really use this, but I wanted a place to store it. In this case, I actually have a void upgrade, so if I ever was to get to 2.1 million, we would just trash it. I'm a hoarder. I like to keep everything. Obviously, you can see from my base, but we don't actually need to store that much kerosene. It's just there's no harm in doing so. So that's pretty much the whole setup for processing oil into diesel and then infusing that diesel into force infused diesel and then being able to run that. Again, you can see here is my orange ender tank that feeds my generators, and the generators are producing quite a bit. So you can see here I'm making 1.5 million SUs, very high efficiency rate here. I only have 208 SUs left over, so I'm using 1.548 million SUs here. Everything's kind of tuned to be maximum power, as well as some automation, some crate automation that I needed, and then obviously running the thermopneumatic off of the front. And then this was my blaze cake setup, which just ran off of a mechanical press uh, at very high speeds because I could, right? 2000 SU isn't going to hurt when you have a million. So that's just kind of my setup. I just want to show it, make a little video. People have been asking for a video. I've helped several people. So here's a video. I hope it helps. Obviously, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments below. I'll do what I can to be able to answer them. I don't normally make videos. As you'll see, this is my first video that I'm going to post. I don't normally make videos, but I do get the notifications. The easiest way to get a hold of myself and get help is through the Discord for FTB Skies Expert. The Discord is very active. It's super helpful. It's a great community. Tons of really helpful people there to be able to answer those questions. And you can find me there as well. I answer questions there all the time. And like I said, the reason I made this video is people are like, you keep answering this question over and over. Why don't you just make a video? So yeah, here's that video. If you have suggestions on other things that you want me to go over, I will see about making videos on those as well. Obviously, you can see we have other pneumatic craft setups. I have a big mechanism set up here to make the PTFE sheets that you need for later game. So it only has a couple of inputs. You put some liquid methane, some water, and some sulfur in, some oxygen, and this has been running for multiple days without any inputs. So if you want to see things like that, or if you're not quite to oil and you want to see biodiesel, this is my zero input biodiesel generation system. This ran for weeks and weeks and produced all of the biodiesel that we needed. It made tons of extra, so you can see it's not hooked up to storage anymore just because I don't need this to run anymore. I'm literally leaving it up there just to remember when I was using it. But you can see we made lots of extra. It makes its own oxygen, it makes its own biodiesel, and there's zero input here. So all of this just works. You never, if you left it on your server and ran it for months and months, which I have done here, nothing ever breaks, nothing ever falls apart. So if you'd like to see me talk about this and how I got my temperatures for the yeast and all that kind of stuff, please mention that, and I'll see about making a video on that as well. So thank you so much for taking some time to listen to me ramble on about my little creations here. And like I said, any feedback or anything, post it in the comments. Thank you so much. Appreciate you.